Okay, so let's get started, shall we? All right, so today, in every sense, is the day we've been waiting for, okay? Today we finally get all of our models, or in our case, our little wine barrel model, over into Substance Painter so we can start interactively creating a cool texture map. I wanted to start the day off with a very kind of simple exploration of how my brain is going to create this little wine barrel. Because even though we all, there's a technique, everyone's going to approach that technique a little bit differently. And from time to time, I like to show you guys how I think and how I kind of consider, my modeling process. And this is not like a recipe. I don't do recipes, okay? There's strategies and ideas that kind of dictate and kind of determine our workflow, right? Because unfortunately, there is no make me a wine barrel button inside of Modo, right? And every wine barrel is going to be different, so there's only ideas that really kind of drive our decision-making process. And I wanted to show you and kind of communicate to you guys what some of my ideas and my thoughts are on how I would construct very quickly and very simply a wine barrel, okay? So as we start with everything in 3D, what's the basic simple shape? Cylinder. It's a cylinder, right? So we already know what tool to basically begin our project with. In addition, is this a symmetrical shape? Yeah. Very much so. This is very much a symmetrical shape, especially if you consider the top and the bottom, right? So it's symmetrical along which axis? Ooh. Now it gets tricky, right? The y-axis, up and down, you got it, right? The top is identical to the bottom. So how much of this am I initially going to model? 50% of it. If I model and focus all of my energy on one half, I can mirror that across the y-axis and get an instant duplicate of the bottom. It's a good way of working, right? It's not about working hard, it's about working smart. Let's use the origin and some of our duplication tools to get us where we want to go. All right, so let me just jump over into Modo here real fast. And I'm just going to talk very quickly on how I'm going to go through this. And we'll also learn some UV mapping things and kind of set the stage for our journey over into Substance Painter here in a minute. Okay. So I want to add a backdrop item, just because I want to show you something here. Okay, oops, there it is. Okay, so this is just the wine barrel that I created. There are 1,000 different wine barrel types out there, by the way, right? The cool thing about the wine barrel is that it changes its profile based on the contents of the wine barrel. What goes in a barrel that's made for wine is going to be different than other substances out there, right? So we get there's a lot of latitude, I guess that's what I'm trying to say. There's a lot of room for kind of improvisation inside of our scene. However, one of the things that I want to make sure that I establish pretty early on in this process is maintaining the curvature of my wine barrel, okay? That's an important point, because if you look at the basic building blocks of our barrel here, we have the wood slats that create the barrel itself, but then we have these metal bands that are all holding these little wooden slots together. I want to make sure that those metal bands kind of represent and are part of the profile curve of the wine barrel itself. So that's something I'm considering, right? They're not two separate pieces in my mind. They're kind of part of the same basic shape. They're components of a much larger piece, okay? So I want to make sure that they look like they're kind of happily together inside of our 3D modeling space, okay? So I'm going to start my adventure by exploring just the basic simple shape of this. It's not about making a model that's incredibly high resolution, but it has detail where we need it, okay? I know that I want to have a nice kind of curve, okay? And I also want to have, maybe towards the end of this assignment, the end of this project, a whole series of wooden slats geometrically that will create a really nice shape for us, okay? That's going to be a cool detail that we can create going forward. All right, so first things first, let me just create a cylinder. I'm going to use a 24-sided cylinder, okay? Before I go any further, I'm going to center this inside of my scene, okay? There we go. Let's look at it from the front. Yep, you can just barely see the line of my polygon, okay? Here, let me turn on my overlays real fast. Oops. They're on, so I need to increase the transparency of my backdrop item. There we go. And now I can see everything. So what I'm trying to establish here is the overall diameter of the barrel itself, okay? One of the things that I've picked up on just in my kind of experience in 3D modeling is that the human eye does a very, very good job of recognizing what I would kind of describe like hand-built curves, okay? Like we're going where we're going in and individually adjusting each of the edge loops to create a curve. We do a really good job of picking up the subtle incongruencies of the curve. So as much as I can, I try to let the computer do the heavy lifting for me and create curves for me, okay? So here's what I'm going to do, and this is kind of a cool little power user trick. This is kind of an intermediate 3D modeling class, so it's good from time to time to throw in some intermediate 3D modeling ideas, okay? So I want to bevel this shape up. And what I'm looking here is I want to try to put that top edge right at the top of my barrel, right about there, okay? Now notice that there's not any sort of interior geometry going horizontally across the wine barrel itself. So this is a good time to start slicing in some geometry. I want, as much as I can, to have an even distribution of polygons going across the height of my geometry. That's good practice, okay? All of our rendering engines, it doesn't matter where you're taking this, computer graphics really want to have an evenly kind of distributed grid of polygons, okay? So I'm going to use loop slice. Oops, hit the wrong button, excuse me. Okay. Now, of course, I'm going to use the uniform distribution of slices, but how many am I going to slice in is a good question, right? There is no magical answer, but here's kind of where I begin. I always try to make sure that there's always a middle point, okay? So right now, if you look at the way the curves, or excuse me, the edges are being sliced into my model, yeah, there's really not, there's a mid row of polygons, but I want a midpoint when it comes to an edge. So an odd number is going to give us what we're after, right? So if I put this up to 3, now, and uniformly distribute it, there we go. Now I have a mid edge here, and then 1, 2. Mid edge in the center, 1, 2 going downstairs. Okay, that's a good place to start. If we have a midpoint, we're going to just get, it's going to give us some edit functionality later on in the mesh, okay? Kind of gets stored into, we're kind of protecting our future self, as they say. I'm going to put this up to 5, okay? Yeah, that's pretty good. I think this is going to allow me to recreate that curve pretty nicely, okay? And once again, we have a midpoint, and then an even number of edges above and below our midpoint, okay? And that's it. That's what I'm going to do at this stage. Now, what I'm not going to do is select each individual edge loop and start scaling it in individually, okay? There are better ways of getting this look, because one of the things that we're trying to capture in the model is a subtle, consistent taper from the high point all the way down to the low point, which is, in our context, is going to be the top and the bottom of the barrel itself, right? So I want a nice, consistent taper. These small little micro adjustments can kind of mess with that, especially in straight-up polygonal models, okay? Game engines, at the moment, don't really support subdivision surfaces. We can get away with murder when it comes to our models when we hit that tab key, because everything is going to get smoothed out and put under tension because of the algorithm. That's not the case when we're working with true polygonal shapes. It's kind of important that it be as geometrically perfect in finger quotes, because there is no perfection, right, as we possibly can make it. So here's my strategy, something that I've been using for a long, long time. I actually love it. I'm going to use a fall off. Now I know that this edge down here at the bottom, okay, which represents kind of the boundary of my mesh, I don't want to touch that. That's perfect. That's right where I want it, okay? All the other ones, the other the other horizontal edge loops, these in here, I need to adjust, okay? Now I don't want to do this by hand. I'm going to use a fall off. Now a fall off is a tool inside of Modo. It's not really a tool, it's kind of a framework, if you will. It's a framework inside of Modo that allows us to influence gradually a tool, okay? So it kind of influences the effect or the impact of a tool along a certain gradient. So you can find all of our fall-offs up here. Before I go any further, I'm going to turn my snapping engine on so I can do some vertex snapping, so I can snap the start and stop points for my fall-off to my geometry. So here's our fall-offs. There's a whole bunch of them. We're not going to go through all of them. Some are really, really useful, like the linear fall-off, which we'll see in a second. The cylinder and the radial fall-off are worth the price of admission into Modo. They really are quite good, okay? But let's just take a look at what they're going to do for us. So these fall-offs are going to basically modulate the impact of a tool. Now, how we use a fall-off is pretty straightforward. We initially have to left-click and drag, okay, which is going to allow us to draw out a zone of influence, okay? I'm starting down here at the bottom. Where you initially left-click is always going to represent 0% influence of the tool that you're going to use, okay? I don't want my tool to influence this part of my mesh, okay? I only want it to influence right here and above, okay? Now, one of the things that we have to be very mindful of is that this is a 3D fall-off. So while it looked good in the front view, I can see that the location of this fall-off in 3D space is not necessarily where I want it, which is why they give us the option over here in our channel boxes to go in and to customize it. So I want the start and stop point to be right there at the 0 of the z-axis, so they're in the center of my cylinder. So this little triangle here, this pyramid, kind of visualizes the impact of a tool. At the bottom, at the tip, 0%. At the top, where it's the widest, 100%.
What happens when it doesn't really show up? You left click, but then you just can't move the mouse anymore.
Left click and drag to do your fall off. Okay? So turn it off. Sometimes when you're working with fall offs, if you don't get the result that you're after, or if it's seemingly not working, turn it off. These are global operators. They're going to influence everything that we do going forward. So turn it off. Hit the button, or hit none, excuse me. It's off. So I'm going to go back into it, linear, and we'll left click and drag, okay, with kind of one movement. Did that do it, Mike?
Oh, I was on curvature, not linear, that's why.
There you go. All right, so let's take a look at what these fall-offs are really going to allow us to do. Simply, they're going to allow us, and I'm going to just scale this in, believe it or not. I'm going to use one of my coplanar handles because I don't want to scale around all 3 axes. I only want to scale around the X and the Z to basically adjust and taper my barrel as it goes towards the top. Okay? Now with this fall off in tow, it's going to modulate the influence of my scale tool along all the selected edges. Okay? Check it out. Kind of makes a quick taper. Okay? Which is pretty cool. You just do it all at once. It's a computer-driven event based off the fall-off, so I'm not individually going in and affecting all of this. What makes fall-offs really kind of powerful is that we can change their shape. Right now we're using the linear shape, which is giving us a very kind of pyramid shape on my wine barrel, right? But if we go in and start exploring maybe these shape presets a little bit, like ease in or ease out, watch what happens. Now we're starting to put a little bit of a curve in there. And ease out is going to give me the shape that I'm after. Okay? I've super driven it. It's not what I want at all. Maybe something right around in here. Yeah. That's pretty consistent. Okay? Let's turn the fall off. And we're on our way. Let's check the reference. Yeah, I'm pretty close. Okay? That's a great way of very quickly and almost kind of consistently creating a nice curve, okay? I don't like to go in and hand scale each edge loop, okay? You can do that, but I think the far superior way of getting to that end result is by doing something like this. Okay, so with that in mind, let's move on to the next step because I'm pretty pleased with what I've created here. I'm going to start naming some things. There's the base of my mesh, and what I want to do now is start establishing the detail for those metal bands, okay? Now, if you look closely at the metal bands, what can you tell me about their shape across all 3 of them? Okay, so very, very kind of cubic, right? What about their size?
Slightly wider than the barrel.
They are slightly wider than the barrel. Yep, so there's a little bit of thickness there for sure. They're also the exact same height, okay? So the exact same height. That's an important feature. How can we do this with our slicing tools, okay? Good question, right? Well, let's take that question out of the loop, but maybe using some Booleans, right? We create one band, and then we use that as a slicer for the rest of my mesh. That could work pretty well. I I don't like close, I like perfect, right? And in a moment like this, where I want 3 bands that are identical in shape, Booleans are a good tool for us to very quickly create a consistent kind of thematic, almost like a motif throughout our model, right? A detail that's identical. So let's do it real fast. I'm going to create a new mesh item. And as Charlie pointed out, they're very rectangular. And I'm going to turn on my snapping tools again so that this handle will snap to the top of my mesh. Okay? That way, it's just absolutely perfect. And somewhere right around in there, I'm pretty pleased with that. I created a radius on it after the fact. I'm happy with that. That's a good start. Now I'm going to extrude this shape out and then center it along the z-axis. Boop. There we go. There it is. There's my slicer. I need 2 more of these. Okay. So I'm going to fire off the move tool. What's the keyboard shortcut that allows us to interactively duplicate this? Control Shift. Yeah, you got it. Control Shift. I can pull down a duplicate, somewhere right around there. Do it again. And that's pretty close. Yep, I'm pretty pleased with that. Let's double check this one. Yep, that should do. Awesome. Now, since I'm going to use a Boolean to slice in this info, I'm just making sure that all of my slicer geometry is going through the mesh. Looks like we are. So we can return to my base now, and let's start doing the work. If you remember from GCOM 402, all of our Boolean tools can be found in the Geometry pull-down menu. And I'm going to use Solid Drill. Big fan of Solid Drill. Specifically, I love the slice operator here. This is really quite good because it's going to slice the current mesh based off of what's behind it. Now we're starting to, here we go. So here are all the edges that we just sliced in. That one, these 2, and these in here. Okay. Now what this gets me, and I'm just going to turn the visibility of that layer on, what this gets me are some rows. All of these guys. Okay. Those are my bands, but I don't want them as part of the mesh for the wood slats themselves. I want them as a discontiguous piece. Okay. I want to separate them out. It's a good practice to have many different pieces. Not everything should be all welded together, right? We want discontiguous pieces. It really does make a more efficient model that way, okay? Because I want to be able to freely go in and continue to edit my metal bands without me having to worry about it messing up my wood slats, right? It just makes it a very quick and easy workflow. So here's what I'm going to do. I'm going to copy all of that geometry. So go Command-C. And then on a new mesh item that I'm going to name bands, I'm going to paste it in. Okay. Excuse me. Now, I'm going to return, and this is the step that hopefully is not super confusing, and I apologize if it is. I'm going to return to the mesh item called base, and I'm going to get rid of all of the geometry that I just sliced in. I've saved it in that separate mesh item, so I don't need that edge loop, that one, that one, that one, and that one. Those I don't need anymore, right? And now I have, here's all the geometry for the bands, okay? Separate it out. And then I have all the geometry for the base, okay? Eventually, these are going to need to get married into one mesh item, but they're going to be discontiguous pieces. I'm just going to cut and paste them in. There we go. So now they're all in the same mesh item. And what we've gained in this process is band geometry that perfectly matches the curvature of my wine barrel. Okay, perfectly. And they're separated out. They're not incredibly high resolution. I've made both the wood plank section controllable and editable separate from the metal bands. Okay, they're on their own kind of path now. If they're all in one mesh, you run the risk of messing up one or the other in any future mesh modeling operation. So here's what I want to do. Let's start giving this some thickness. How thick are these metal bands? From your research last week, how thick are they? Not that thick, right? They're pretty thin. It's thin metal, right? That's all it really is. So let's go in and just do a little bit of a bevel here. So if your bands are like this, okay, that's not going to look probably the way we want it to look, right? So real thin. Doesn't have to be anything super extreme. We just need to visually separate them from the base. Yeah, I'm pretty happy with that. Now I'm going to take it one step further here and start to round out these edges. A simple little chamfer on my metal bands goes a long, long way. When it comes to most things, a little edge bevel goes a long, long way. Of course, the round level, you have to have a darn good reason to go above 1, in my opinion. A round level of 0 is going to give us what we're after. In most things, especially in the game art pipeline, we just need to have some sort of small little chamfer in there to catch the light. Okay? You're never really going to see a super high detail radius. We can achieve that result a little bit more better in other workflows, but at the least, just give a little chamfer on there. That way, it'll catch the light. That's all you're really after. If you turn on the wireframes, or turn off, excuse me, we can start to see visually that all those pieces are beginning to separate on the model itself, which is a good practice. Okay. Now for the metal bands, I'm done. Let's go back and focus on the wood slats, because there's some energy in here that I need to spend on the slats that's going to give me a pretty high quality product. Okay. And it'll give me really super accurate UVs. One of the problems that we have when it comes to UV mapping is ensuring that we're getting a real consistent UV shape across all of the objects inside the scene itself. So maybe we change our production pipeline a little bit here to give us what we're after. Let's start with the geometry, because there's some work in here that we need to establish. Now, if you look at the top of our wine barrel, does it just kind of terminate there at a flat plane?
No.
What do we see there, Charlie? Yeah, a small little recess, for sure. So in every sense, we can achieve that quite wonderfully with a simple little bevel. What I'm establishing here is the thickness of my boards, okay? Shift, click, and then it goes down. And I'm also going to give it a little bit of an inset in here as well to just make it a fun angle, okay? So there it is. That's the top of our wine barrel. I want to turn my wireframes back on for a second. And I want us to speak for a second about that gigantic n-gon at the top. What are we going to do with this gigantic n-gon? We can't leave it as it is, so what are the options that are in front of me? You can do spiky. Spiky is a great way. Now, what is spiky ultimately going to do? Yeah, it's going to make a pizza pie at the top, right? It's a really easy way to resolve this n-gon. With this polygon selected, you can find your spiky tool in the Polygon collection of tools. There's your blows. There's a good old spike. Okay. Then you click on the mesh. Boop. It's pizza pie. Okay. A lot of folks think that spiky is a way for us to get a fewer amount of polygons at the top. Okay. I say no, actually. If you count the number there, it's 24. They're all triangles. It was easy to create this, but this is definitely not the most efficient way to get the mesh that we're after. What may be a faster way of getting the result is slicing it, doing some edge slicing, and physically slicing it into quads. It requires a little bit more labor, but we get all quad polygons, and we're going to get a surface that has a fewer number of polygons on it than if we had just done spiky. I always do a quick exploration. It's like, is it really worth my time to do a quick spiky, or am I going to get a far superior result if I was just to slice it into quads? If we count the number of polygons that are up here now, oops. Yeah, I got 20, so I shaved myself 4 polygons off the total polygonal count on the top. Okay, took a couple extra steps, but it's worth it. Okay, and we get all quad polygons, which is always, 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 always the preferred surface type for all things computer graphics. Okay. All right, so that's looking pretty great. I'm happy with the overall shape. I'm happy with the bands. I want to spend some cycles talking about and maybe exploring a process for us to create the illusion of individual wood planks. Okay? When it comes to 3D modeling, I'm a big believer that a majority of what we should do, or a good place to begin what we're going to do here, should replicate our kind of the workflow and the ideas of a cooper. I think in this thing, the cooper is the craftsperson that's responsible for making a barrel. Okay? So if you were a cooper, okay, you're standing in front of a gigantic, a lumber yard, right, full of wood. How would this look? What would your process be? Every piece of wood starts off as what basic simple shape? a rectangle. It really does, okay? So a cooper, a craftsperson that's responsible for making a barrel, is going to start with a whole bunch of rectangular pieces, okay? A whole series of them. He doesn't have one cylinder that we get to bend into shape like we have here. It's a whole series of rectangular pieces that are put together in a big circle. That's the role and the purpose of these bands, right? Is to hold all those rectangular pieces together. Now, how is a cooper going to get that wonderful curved shape on their board? Remember, you go back into, a couple hundred years ago, they didn't have a CNC, machine that would automatically cut the board into circles and stuff like that, right? So how did they get a curve? Does anyone know? It's kind of cool, right? They had to bend it, right? They put them in steam boxes. Water is the most amazing thing on the face of the planet, right? Especially when it comes to wood, because water is going to make our wood almost kind of malleable. We infuse the wood fibers with water. Steam will do that for us. And after a couple hours of hanging out in the steam box, we then can take it out very quickly and form it and bend it into a shape. And that's most likely how the coopers of the day got a basic simple shape. They probably planed it out and started carving it into its final shape. But they started with a square piece of stock, and they bent or carved it into the shape that we see here. I like starting from that perspective as well. What if we start with some basic simple shapes, some basic rectangles that we then can start to carve and bend into individual boards, right? So check this out. This is a cool place and a cool idea for us to go for. Okay, so I'm going to do this. I'm going to hide everything, and yeah, okay. Here's what we're going to do. I'm going to take the top, all of this, and all of that, and I'm going to cut it. So Command X, Command V, cut it away from the base of my barrel. Okay, and I'm going to focus all of my energy on maybe just this one right here. Okay. Well, initially we'll start flushing out the entire thing, just for organizational purposes only. I'm going to cut and paste the selected geometry into this mesh item, the one that's called bands. So Command X, go to bands, Command V, just so it's always there as reference. And I'm going to use a really cool tool here called Thicken, which is going to help me establish the overall dimension of the board itself. Okay, check it out. This is kind of cool. So let's do Thicken. You click on the viewport to apply the tool, and the little blue handle here is going to help us start to figure out the new dimensions of this. And I'm going to use it from the top, and I'm going to thicken it until right here those lines kind of match up. Right there. That's pretty good. Okay. Awesome. Looking pretty good. Now, what I need to do is start changing the shape, because I want this ring to be sitting right where the top of the barrel is. So this is just, luckily for us, a simple transformation down. Cool. And now I'm going to loop slice in another ring. And let's see. Yep, that's good. I'll just start with one. And then I'm going to move it up. Okay. Now, I want it to be dead even, and I mean dead even with the outside edge. This is a great opportunity to use our snapping tools. Okay, let the computer do all the heavy lifting for us. Okay, so I'm going to turn on my snapping, fire off the move tool, and then because my action centers are off, I can place. I'm going to click on that vert, which is going to move my tool handle right there. I'm going to grab the Y indicator of my transform tool, and I'm going to just place my cursor bloop, right on that vert, and it snaps to it. So now I know beyond any reasonable doubt that those two edges are in the exact space, same height in 3D space. Okay. Now I have some additional modeling in here that I need to do, and I'm going to turn off my snapping engine now. I'm just going to scale this somewhere right around in there. And yes, I'm going to get geeky here. Let's see, 2.5. I'm going the wrong way. Oops. So let's do 0.65. Ha! I got lucky. Luck will beat skill and cunning every time. Okay, so there we go. Now I've kind of recreated what in essence is going to be a single board. Because if you think about it, all of this in here, all of that, and going back down the inside, that's a single board that's either been bent or been carved into that shape. And then the top is going to be maybe 3 or 4 boards to create kind of like an opening for the barrel itself. Okay. So what I'm trying to create geometrically here, pieces that would naturally be there in the actual wine barrel itself. Okay. All right. So I'm pretty pleased with this. This is going exactly the way I want it to go. Now comes both the fun part and the disastrous part. I'm going to get rid of all those polygons down there, because that's going to be my symmetry point. And this is the part that usually scares people. Okay. But hang out, bear with me for a second. Okay. I'm going to create one board, and I'm going to delete all the other ones. Okay. If I've done my job correctly, and I believe I have, okay, I modeled around the origin. So I'm going to make one board, UV map one board, and then duplicate it 24 times, and my job's done. Okay. Let's check it out. I'm going to invert my selection by hitting the open braces key. And bye-bye. Okay. So now I'm in a full court press to make a single board. Okay. Let's start putting this together. I have some geometry up in here that I need to figure out, but let's get the easy ones done first. Let's connect auto connection continuous bridge. You haunt me. Go away. There we go. Okay. Cool. Notice that I'm leaving the opening down here because that's my mirror point, right? I don't want a polygon down there because when I model or when I mirror this down, I want this to be open. Now this in here is where it gets interesting, because if you look at the structure here, and I want to help you guys out in the back especially. Okay, let's do, there we go. Okay, check it out. I have an n-gon up here that I need to resolve. Okay, so how am I going to resolve that n-gon? I don't want any additional geometry running across the face on that polygon, because that's going to screw up the curvature, potentially screw up the curvature of my mesh. Okay, I want to preserve the structure in here as much as I can. So what I'm going to choose to do as an alternate is to loop slice going down here. Loop slice, a count of 1, is going to put a new edge segment right there in the center, which is just perfect because now I can bridge to the top. Do the same thing for this. Bridge, bridge, bloop. Wonderful. Now all this work is going to make sense here in about 2 seconds, because this is really the big benefit of working with these individual boards. Let's do this. I'll select some edges, and really what I would like to have is some wonderfully rounded edges up here at the top. I know I'm going to see these chamfers, these rounded edges. I think I missed one. Yep. Quick double check. Let's go all the way down to the bottom. Yep. On bevel, a simple little chamfer is all we need. There's the mesh itself. Starting to look pretty cool. Starting to look like an individual board that goes on the inside of a wine barrel. Okay? Now if we start to unhide or turn our other parts and pieces back on, you can start to see that on this, I really don't need all of this geometry anymore, because I've established that geometry with my individual wooden boards like it actually would be on a wine barrel, right? Okay. That's looking good. Let's go back over here. Let's start getting to work. Okay, so proof of concept, just to show you that there is a method to my madness. This is really what we've been working towards, okay? Because I have one just absolutely cool, okay? This is looking really good. In all honesty, I'm quite pleased with this, okay? This is looking good. I'm going to just zip ahead for a microsecond so you guys can see the product of all of this, okay? I've been careful to model my cylinder around the origin. Okay, so ultimately, if I go back, change my action center to origin, and then do a radial array of 24, I started with a 24-sided cylinder. So if I put 24 of these back in, there it is. And it's starting to look like a little wine barrel. Now, in doing so, we get a really good understanding of what we don't need on one of those single wooden boards, right? If you look carefully on the model itself, yeah, I really don't need the insides, because this piece is always going to be on the top, right? We're never going to see the inside, so all that interior geometry I can just delete, right? In addition, if we were to examine just one of my boards, we don't really, the only thing we see is the conclusion of my chamfered edges. I don't see all the sides, which is great, okay? They were important, and they allowed me to help create the shape quickly, but now I can just get rid of them, which is pretty cool. So I'm going to hit undo a couple stages before my duplication, and I'm going to start deleting everything I don't need, which is the majority of the mesh. Actually, what would probably be, well, 6 to 1, half dozen to another. I was going to say you can just select what you want to keep and then invert it, but it's pretty fast. So I don't need any of this. Oops, missed one. Just quick double check, make sure I got everything. Yep, bye-bye, and that's what I'm left with. Okay. That's pretty sweet. Okay. Now with this, one of the unfortunate things about an edge bevel with a round level of 0 is that you're going to get some triangles in there. Triangles are not the end of the world. Okay. We just don't want to have them everywhere. In a small little detail area like this, I'm going to live with it. You know, I'm just going to live with it. It's okay. If it was really a problem, I can go in and make it a quad polygon with some additional editing work, but I know it's not going to be a problem, so I'm just going to move on, okay? All right, so let's unwrap this thing real fast, okay? You know, actually, since this is going to be one large piece for this individual, I'm going to do this. I'm going to mirror it. My action center is still at origin, so now it's mirrored across the y-axis, and there it is. There's my complete board, and I'm going to unwrap this, okay? So over to UV Edit. And now's a good time to start taking care of our UVs. So I'm going to call this wine barrel. Go. And let's get to work. Okay. This is a very easy piece to unwrap. It really is. However, we should probably start thinking about where natural texture detail is going to go as we unwrap it. On a piece of wood, if you're at Home Depot and you're looking at a piece of wood at a 2x4, right? We should be mindful of the grain, okay, and where the grain is going to go, right? So this is the long face of the board. So I know I'm going to have wood grain going up and down this direction. So this is an important landmark for us. Maybe I should have this piece be oriented vertically inside of my UV space. So the wood grain, a two-dimensional picture of wood grain, will get mapped correctly. But the moment we get up here, okay, this is not going to be wood grain. It's going to be end grain, right? If you look at it, you do a cross cut on a piece of wood, okay, and I know there's a term for it, I've already forgotten. I think it may be just face grain and end grain, okay? On the outside of a piece of wood, the grain's going to be going like this, right? Have like a knot in here or something, right? It's going to be going like that, okay? But on the end, on a cross cut, the grain pattern's not going to be like that. What's it going to look like? Yeah, bunch of dots, and really, you should start to see the rings of the tree, right? Because you take a log and you cut it across, you'll see the rings of the tree. Now, a small piece of board is going to be like in here, okay, on a log, okay? But point being, the end grain wood pattern is going to be different than what it is on the face. An excellent place to break apart and create a UV scene. So I know that, or I'm going to guess that maybe, yeah, all of this, okay, this in here is going to be end grain, okay. So I'm going to go into my edge selection mode and just double click that edge, which is going to create a boundary between these two pieces, which will allow me very quickly in any application to create the illusion of end grain and face grain on my little board here. Okay? So with that in mind, I need to do the same on the bottom. I think it was, what, this one? Yep, okay, cool. I want to use the Unwrap tool. Left click, there it is. Very pleased with that. There's my little wood board. Okay, this is a great and excellent UV island. I want to orient some of the pieces a little bit to make sure that when I put a flat picture of wood grain, that it's going to come out correctly on the board itself. So if my wood grain picture is, if the picture of my wood grain is having the grain flow vertically, I need to have my board also flow vertically. Notice that I have that edge selected. I love these two tools right here because it's going to move the entire island. I want to move it so that that edge is horizontal. Boop. You can see what it did there. Do the same thing for its partners. And one of the reasons why I love them is you can do multiples at the same time. Okay, so that's the top. That's the bottom. Good with that. I want to pack these in real quick. There we go. So they're nice and clean, nice and organized inside of my UV space. And here's the moment we've been waiting for. And this is the cool thing about UV mapping, especially when we're UV mapping items that have duplicated parts and pieces, is that if we make one and UV map it before we duplicate it, all of the duplicates will get UV'd at the exact same time. Okay? Check it out. It's pretty neat. Here's my piece. It's all done. It's all UV'd. I'm going to make this part just a little bit smaller so you can see the final result. I want to change my action center to origin. And then once again, I'm going to fire off radial array. Count of 24. Bloop. There it is. And I'm almost done. There are my bands. I got to do my bands real fast. But here, let's go back. There are every single one of my wood planks is sharing the exact same UV space. I don't have to go in and individually UV map each plank, right? That would be horrible, as they say. That would just be, how many of you guys individually, UV mapped every single piece, right? It's about working smart, not hard, right? I'm going to do the exact same thing with my bands. I want to UV map the top, and then when I mirror the geometry to the bottom, all of those UVs are going to be created automatically for us as well, okay? Because the UVs are duplicated alongside the geometry, okay? Now this isn't the final position that I want all of this stuff to be in. I want to do a pack here in a second once I'm done with my model. So I have some work in front of me left to do, but it's pretty easy work at this moment. Let's get these pieces in here. I'm going to cut, paste, okay, starting to look pretty cool. Let's unhide. Let's do the UVs for my bands. These are pretty easy, okay? However, we need to define a seam because I want a big rectangular strip for the UVs for my bands. We can't avoid seams. We can't. It's part of our workflow. But, ... what's the idea behind it? What's the strategy? We're going to have a seam, right? Where are we going to put that seam?
Top and bottom?
Maybe. Yeah, somewhere where it's hidden or at the least noticeable. Now, on a cylindrical shape like a barrel, where would be the least noticeable spot?
On the inside.
Yeah, kind of on the inside, but there's really no inside geometry. It's all outside geometry. So you're going to see it, right? We're going to have to select a vertical edge loop on each of these bands. So we're going to have to select one of those, right? But which one of these are we going to select, right? I got 24 options on each band. Which is the correct answer? Bingo, and that's it, right? The back of the model, right? We're always going to have a seam. So let's put it in a place that would naturally kind of make sense. On the back of things or on the underside of things, places where we're not necessarily going to see it are excellent candidates for our UV seams, okay? So I'm going to look at my scene from the top. My compass is telling me that the top of my screen is the negative side of my z-axis. So that's the back of my scene. So maybe these guys in there those are my seams. Okay, or that's where my seam is going to go on each one of these. Okay. Now, this is going to be, I'm going to experiment here. Of course, the Unwrap tool is going to give me what I want. Yeah, I'm glad it did this. Okay. A lot of you guys are probably saying, whoa, WTF, right? What happened? Why did it do that, right? The computer's given us some excellent, excellent feedback as to what it needs to unwrap these shapes correctly. Whenever you see these big red circles or this big red geometry in the scene, that's the computer saying, I don't have enough information to correctly unwrap this, so I'm guessing, and I'm guessing very poorly. Okay? So we just need more information. And it's even telling us that we need to select kind of like the boundaries of each one of these UV islands, or each one of these polygonal pieces, to create a clean UV island. Okay? It's not a mystery why we're getting a big red disk up here at the top of this shape and another one over here. The computer is telling us that we need to add some edges. That one and that one. Same thing on each one of the bands. I've gotten into the habit of selecting the boundaries of all of my UV islands as I'm unwrapping them, because I'm more than often going to get the result that I want, and that's the result that I'm after. That simple addition to my selection gave the computer more information to solve how to unwrap the geometry and lie it flat on a tabletop. Okay?
Can you repeat what you said?
Yeah. So what we want to do in a moment like this is give the computer more information. Because it's looking at each one of these polygonal pieces individually, but it doesn't know where these pieces kind of start and stop their shape. So by going in and selecting the boundaries of each one of these pieces right there and right there, we're basically establishing a start and a stop point for the evaluation engine of our UV mapping tool set. Go. Let me just grab the bottom one. Bloop, bloop. Bloop, bloop. There we go. I'll run unwrap. Aha! There it is. Now we're close, right? I want this to be a really solid rectangular piece.
So, hypothetical question. If this was for like a video game pipeline where the camera is essentially always going to be switching around depending on the controls, would it be a better idea to make inside geometry and then make the scene there?
So let me just make sure I'm on the same page with you. So your idea would be to create something like this. Something like that?
Yeah, and then make this scene on the inside.
Okay.
Because the camera is always going to be switching
Yeah.
around. So
Where is that seam going to be?
on the inside?
On the inside, okay. Keep in mind, though, we're trying to go for a shape that looks like a long rectangle, right? If we had inside geometry, it wouldn't solve our problem entirely. It would just put the seams, well, we'd still have a seam, okay? We still have a seam, because in order to get two long rectangular pieces, one for the inside and the outside, I'm effectively having to do the exact same thing, okay? There it is, okay? So we don't ever lose the seam. It's always going to be there. There's one piece, there's another piece.
No, I wasn't asking about losing the seam. I was asking about placing it inside so that the player does not see the seam.
Well, you're always going to see the seam, because check it out. There it is there on the back, but that's the inside geometry piece. That's where the seam is, right? You can see it right there, okay? And on the other piece, it has to go through the front in order for it to solve and create its own band. So in this particular moment, yeah, that's just not going to work, unfortunately. You're going to get the same result either way.
What if there was a slice in the middle?
A slice in the middle and the back.
On the inside?
So like in here, and then maybe having,
Wouldn't it just fold outwards?
yeah, you could definitely do that. Yeah, for sure. That's a strategy, for sure. In this moment, though, well, you're still going to have a seam. You're still going to have a seam. Yeah, you're still going to have a seam, because if you did another one, yeah, you still have to get this into a long rectangular band, right? The only way to get a circle into a rectangular band is to cut it down the center. Cool idea, though. I like the way you're thinking. All right, real quickly, because I'm spending a little bit more time on this than I would have liked to have. What's the fast way to get these 3 UV islands into a rectangular piece? Yeah, the rectangle tool, and it is magical, right? I love me some rectangle. So I can even, at times, you can do them all simultaneously. It's right here, rectangle, turn it on, you'll get a little pop over. Just bloop. No, I'll go nice and flat. Okay. Huh? Yeah. Yeah, we want to try to get them into rectangular shapes as often as we can, right? Now I'm going to make sure that I pack these real quick, just to make sure, yep, they're all the correct size. Now let's unhide things, and let's get to work. Oh, didn't unwrap that. I'm just going to do a project from view. Oof, there we go. And then last but not least, I have some work in here that I need. I need these all to be mirrored to the bottom. Action center to origin. Let's grab my modeling tools, mirror them across the middle of the y-axis, and that is a near finished model. Now, a lot of these UVs, actually all of the UVs for these separate pieces are overlapping each other. I don't want that, okay? I want to be able to go in and paint a custom top and a custom bottom, or maybe have each board look a little different. So it's important that we start to spread all these UVs out so that they all can get their own level of customization across the texture set. Okay. Luckily for us, and this really is kind of a luck thing, I'm pretty happy with this. Pack is our guy. Now I'm going to save this. There we go. Hear this, okay? If there's one thing you learned today, save your project before you run pack. I have had more crashes when I'm packing my UVs than I care to have had, right? It is a fracture point in our workflow. Because you only want to UV map these things once, right? And if you lose everything when you're packing the UVs, man, that is like salt on a wound, right? Because the pack stage is the last step in all of this, right? So let's do it real fast. I've just saved my project file. Of course, you can find pack over inside of our UV tool operators. And as a reminder, we have 3 options: move, scale, and rotate. If you leave orient on, the computer's going to go automatically rotate your UVs to pack them in a way it deems most efficient, okay? I usually turn it off because I want to be able to control the orientation of all my pieces in the context of the wood grain on each individual wooden plank. That's a really great example of why I want to leave it off, right? Because I've already told, the UVs that I want you vertical so I can put wood grain on top of you. So I like to control it, so I usually turn it off. We'll hit OK. There we go. Up and running. Okay. Now these that are yellow, okay, these are not broken. Okay, the yellow ones, if you look very carefully, are the pieces that I mirrored a second ago. Okay, so we want to unmirror the UVs, or actually that's not right. Let me rephrase that. We mirrored the geometry, but we didn't mirror the UVs, okay? There is a mirror command over here that will allow you to mirror. I want to mirror along the V, which is the up and down axis. Yep, there they are. Okay. Now they're no longer yellow. Haha. Let's pack this again. Yep, and I'm a happy camper. Okay. And this is looking pretty good. I'm pretty pleased with this, okay? Now we have some options in here to change how all of this is getting packed. One of the things that you may want to explore, and I don't think it's going to make too big of an impact with this, just given how many wood planks that I have. But you may want to play around with the orientation of these metal bands. You need them all facing the same way, but that certainly could be vertical. I like to experiment. If I pack now, is it a better result? Yeah, and I think I'm actually probably getting a little bit better result. We just need to be consistent, okay? The objects that are going to receive the same type of texture all need to be oriented the same way, okay? The UV islands that I'm going to be using for my wood planks, these guys, they're all orientated the same way, so they're going to receive a texture the exact same way. So all the wood grain is going to look the exact same, which is what I'm after. Okay. Yeah, I'm pretty pleased with that. That looks good. Good job, Pat. Give myself a high five. I'm a big believer that we should always be giving ourselves positive affirmation. I am awesome. I am awesome. I'm going to save my project file. Huh?
I said no one else is going to tell us that. So.
You know, sometimes you got to take care of your future self, right? That's why I'm a big. That's what I say every time. I'm like, it's donut time. I'm taking care of my future self right now, right? All right. It's donut time, man. I'm taking care of me 5 minutes from now, enjoying the contents of my donut. Yep. On a complete side note, have you guys been seeing, I'm a big fan, I read a lot, and I read a lot of news. Have you guys been seeing all the news stories coming out of these time travelers coming back? It's awesome. This is so crazy, but I love it, okay? They're all in England right now. They're like time travelers saying they're coming back from like the future, right? It's awesome. It's so entertaining. So I wish it to be true.
New ones, huh?
Huh?
I usually look up stuff like that. I haven't seen any new time.
Yeah, new time travelers. New time travelers. Let me tell you, it's pretty great. Yeah, one guy I was reading last night on Flipboard that he was claiming that we're about to enter into a nuclear war with North Korea. And let's see, what was it? And he was saying a couple other things. They were coming back to reshape our present to make sure that their future was exactly like it is in the movies, right? So which is why it's complete BS. But it's still, when it's 2 a.m. and your son won't go back to sleep, it's how I entertain myself, right? All right, anyways, let's get back to work. Okay, so that's a little bit of my thought process, my modeling workflow, okay? This is a really great way for us to create a very clean mesh with clean UVs, without a lot of drama in there. It's a pretty straightforward mesh. If I wasn't talking and teaching, kind of going through this process, this probably would have taken me about 20 minutes to do. Okay, so when you think about duplication and you look for opportunities to duplicate geometry, your modeling workflow goes pretty quick. It can go pretty quick, especially on a shape like this. And of course, at the end of the day, you just got to take a look at it. If you're a happy camper here, then I'm a happy camper, right? And I'm a pretty happy camper. That's a good looking wine barrel. You can see the benefit of having each in. Say again. Right? You can see pretty quickly the benefits of each individual board, right? Yeah. If you were to look at a cylinder, you wouldn't have these. Oops, a little too close. Okay. You wouldn't have these cool little specular highlights coming down in between the boards. Of course, the opposite of that are all the shadows that the little crevice in between the boards is naturally going to attract, okay, and create for us. So it's time well spent, in my opinion. Time really well spent. It doesn't take too much energy, and that's a pretty clean model. I'm pretty pleased with what I've come up with here. This is also a model, since I was pretty disciplined in my approach. It's all quad polygons, so this is a model that I can easily continue to roll through a television and feature film pipeline. In addition, it integrates instantly into the game art pipeline. Of course, that's what we're studying here. Okay? And I didn't go too crazy on the details. Yeah, I'm pretty pleased with it. So this is now something that we can take over into Substance Painter and start working with it. Here's what I want you to do, okay? And I'm going to let you kind of work for maybe 30 minutes or so. Okay, we'll work right up until our break, which is, I think, at 2:50. Here's what I want you to do. I want you guys to make, real quickly, not a wine barrel, but a little wooden crate with this idea in mind, okay? If you think about a wooden crate, what is it? It's a box, okay? Made out of what? Wood, yeah, okay, yes. Thank you, Captain Obvious, right? Yeah, individual wooden planks, right? So if we just take a look, do some shopping here, okay? Here are a zillion little simple wooden crates. Make one real fast, okay? Start individually creating some boards. Do some simple little bevels in there like I did, okay? Round level of 0. Just a little chamfer in there to catch the light and create a specular highlight. And then we'll have something that we can bring over into Substance Painter and start playing with. Sound good? Should we do it? All right, so let's just round it out. At 3 o'clock, we're going to start talking about how we get things out of Modo and into Substance Painter so we can start texturing. Sound good? All right, let's get to work. So while you guys were working, look what I made. No, I didn't make that while you guys were working. Sorry. This is where I get to be a little Julia Childs. Yeah. Look what's cooking in the oven. Right, I had already made my little crate beforehand. But this is my crate, okay? And I want to talk about the process of getting this model out of Modo and into Substance Painter, okay? This is the part that no one wants to do, right? Because when you're done with the model, when you're done with the model and the UVs, what's the thing that you just want to do instantly? You just want to go paint, right? You just want to export and start painting in Substance Painter. But there's some legit setup that we have to do in Modo to make sure that what gets imported into Substance Painter allows us to get the best quality results. So don't skip this step. And in my opinion, it's the most important part, okay, of our kind of I/O input-output system inside of Modo, and allows us to explore a really cool, neat part of our interface that we haven't really had a chance to explore yet, and that's the Game Tools layout. Have you guys been curious what that Game Tools layout does? Well, let's check it out. It's pretty cool. So, of course, naturally, at the top of our screen in all of our layout tabs, there it is, Game Tools. Bloop. Okay. Now, depending on who's used Modo last, it could look like this. Okay. The Games Tool layout is a really cool new way of working inside of the Modo interface, in that all of these windows in the center here are controlled by all of these tabs, or these buttons down here at the bottom. Okay, so there's some customization inside this layout that I would encourage you to do. These are toggles, so if I wanted to turn on and off the schematic viewport, just hit the button. Same with the UV view. I usually change my viewport, or excuse me, my layout to look like this. I turn off the schematic, and I also turn off preview. And what I want to see is the UV view, okay? Because that's really what we're all about right now, okay? All right, so here's my little crate, and there are the UVs for all of my little crate pieces, okay? So everything is UV, looks pretty stellar. Geometrically, if you look at what I've accomplished here, and that, I think this speaks quite wonderfully to the power of that 0 round level on our edge bevel tool, okay? Because all we really need to capture is a simple little specular highlight. From this view in the render engine, do you really see, you can understand that there's a little rounded edge there, right? You can see the little specular highlight that's getting picked up right here. You can see a lovely one right there. They're all over the place. You see it, right? You sense it, okay? You don't need to have a round level that's higher than 1. God forbid you go up to a round level of 2, right? You're just adding a lot of geometry into your mesh that you fundamentally don't need to get the illusion that you're after, especially with small little details like this. We get lost in an uncanny valley pretty quickly when it comes to 3D modeling, because we can get as close as we want to our object, right? I can get, way up in there. I can even go on the inside of the box. Oops. I can get extraordinarily close. And let's see. Yeah, where am I? I'm on the corner. Even here, it's starting to look pretty good. I'm pretty happy with this, okay? So you don't need to have a tremendous amount of detail. All right. Let's go over back to our Game Tools tab and start to explore this in a pretty compelling way, okay? So what we're doing in the Game Tools tab is the setup for export, okay? Because we've modeled our crate, or a wine barrel, or going forward in the future, we're going to be doing a treasure chest and a whole bunch of other things. We've modeled here in Modo, but now we need to paint all of our texture maps over inside of Substance Painter. Now, the cool thing about Substance Painter is that it allows us to take the actual geometry, the model itself, export the geometry, and import it into Substance Painter, and then we're going to paint on the model, which is exactly what we're after, right? It's really cool. And then we can see instantaneously the final finished results, okay? It's great. It's changed my texturing workflow. However, there's a couple little things that we need to be very mindful of. Before I go any further, I want to draw focus to this, because this is excellent resources to go back to, okay? All right, so on Canvas, I've been a busy little bee. If you refresh your page, while you guys were working on your crates, I was loading in some stuff in, this is the wrong class. I'm sorry, I was like, why isn't it here? Excuse me, let me leave student view. I apologize, but if you go into the week 8 module, excuse me, week 7, inside of Canvas for this class, you'll find that I've loaded in some additional learning resources that I really commend to your personal personal kind of reading. All right, here we go, week 7. Okay, check it out. I've added some things in here. Of course, we have our assignment, which we'll talk about in detail as we get closer to the end of class today. But then there's actually 3 things that I want you guys to be very, very aware of, okay? These 2, so items number 2 and 3 are videos that the lovely folks down at Pixel Fondue have created for us that really quite beautifully illustrates the export from Modo and then the export from Substance Painter process that we need to follow, okay? Specifically, and I'm going to reorder this just so it's a little bit more easier to follow. This one right here says Baking Modo's Rounded Edge Shader. This allows, this one goes into detail, the same detail that I'm about to go through on the export from Modo. So how to do all the Modo prep work so that it goes into Substance Painter correctly. This is a good place to begin as reference in addition to the live stream lecture. This one's first, okay? Now to get it out of Substance Painter and then back into Modo, that's what this one, and apparently I went creating, because I misspelled it, but creating a Substance Painter preset for Modo. Okay, we're going to go over that in class today, but use these as reference for this process. In addition, I also created a cool little image for you that visualizes the export presets that we're going to be, once it loads, there it is, it's just a picture. We'll talk about this here in a second. Towards the end of class today, the role of this picture, but again, this is reference, so you can go back in and really understand the connections that need to be made so that everything gets sent to and from all of these applications correctly. All right, with that in mind, let's return to Modo for a second and talk about the first things that we need to do, okay? First step in preparing our model for export is to define some hard edges. This is new terminology for us inside the UV mapping workflow. And what the hard edges allow us to do, or basically what it tells the computer, it determines a start and stop point for the smoothing angle inside the mesh. And let me just turn off the visibility of my grid here, so we can go in and check it out. Okay, so I'm in the Game Tools layout, and then over here on the left in our toolbars, we're going to ignore these export presets for the moment, and we're going to go down into the Vertex Map collection of tools, okay? And specifically, we're going to look at all of this jazz up here at the top, because this is where we want to primarily spend all of our energy for the next couple moments. We want to create some smoothing groups that define when the computer is going to start and stop its smoothing of the surfaces, okay? The Modo rendering engine, and all rendering engines for that matter, are looking at each one of these surfaces, but to create a more kind of organic shape, it's looking at each plane, geometric plane on the mesh, and it's trying to smooth the lighting angles around them, okay? Now that's really great for organic stuff, but for hard surface stuff like we're doing, we need to double check to make sure that it's done its job correctly, okay? So we need to go in and adjust our smoothing groups real fast, and it's pretty easy. Okay, let's see. If we go in here, yeah, I've already done mine, but I'm gonna nuke it. I'm gonna start over. Okay. All right, so here's my mesh without any of the smoothing groups applied to it. And you can see exactly what the computer's doing here. It's smoothing that individually. See how it's really kind of flat shaded? And then it's smoothing that one. What we want is that we want it to smooth across, right? To create the illusion that maybe there's a small little radius there. So that it's, instead of looking at each individual polygon and smoothing each individual polygon, it's looking at groups of polygons and smoothing across them, okay? This is the function of the hard edges, okay? It defines the boundaries of these groups, of smoothing groups, okay? So the first thing that we want to do to start this process is to twirl open the Other Maps section inside of our Lists tab. We've been hanging out in the UV Map section, and you have to do this after our UV maps are created, okay? So you, in our sequence, you are done, point of no return when you do this process, okay? This is the windmill and Back to the Future Part 3. Once the train goes by the windmill, you guys remember that in Back to the Future Part 3? Yeah? You guys know what I'm talking about, right? Back to the Future Part 3, when they go back to the Wild Wild West instead of going to the future? right? As they formulaically do in all the Back to the Future movies, they always have a scale model that Doc Brown and Marty McFly make, right? That tells the audience. It's total exposition, by the way, in prose, right? They're basically committed. This is what to expect, audience, right? And they tell the the train's going to go past the windmill, and then this is going to happen. They make a scale model to test it, right? And then Back to the Future Part 3, once the train and the time machine go past the windmill, they're either going to go back to the future or they're going to go over the cliff into a fire explosion, right? So this is our windmill, okay? This is a point of no return. We are either going back to the future successfully or we are firing or going to die in a fiery death, okay? So we are done with our UV mapping. We are ready to export, okay? As we talked about last time, UV mapping is kind of like we're creating a coloring book for our model, right? So we don't want to change our model after we've created the UVs. So we have to commit. This is that moment. So we're in the Other Maps section, okay? Here's our UV map. Here's our other maps. The first thing that we want to ask the computer to do in our Vertex collection of tools is to create a whole series of hard edges from the UV boundaries, okay? And it's that one. Harden the polygonal boundaries from the currently selected UV map, okay? So what this is going to do is that it's going to go in and look at the boundaries of each one of your UV islands and make a hard edge, a definition of where to start and stop the smoothing based on the boundaries of our UVs. So let's do it. I'm going to deselect everything. Make sure that my UV map is selected. Click on the button. Okay, now immediately you can see that things are starting to shift on the model itself, right? Let me undo that. Here's with no smoothing. Here's with a simple smoothing group added, right? Now the computer is choosing to smooth around those corners, right? It isn't viewing each polygon individually. It's looking at a group of polygons and smoothing the lighting kind of solutions around that group, okay? So first thing that we create is a boundary map, okay? And it's stored right there, okay? All right, so this purple button, that guy. Now, another thing that I like to do, and this is a pretty, it's messed up. If you look down here on the inside of my panels, it's totally botched it, okay? And this is why, because it's smoothing across all these surfaces. Well, I'm losing that definition in here. There's actually a little V shape in my model to make a little crevice to suggest a board, okay? I'm losing that crevice because the computer is smoothing all of its lighting information across the entirety of the group. I don't want that, right? I want to go in and start to terminate when some of these, when the smoothing groups start and stop. So here's what I normally, and a lot of folks normally do to kind of aid us in this process, to get us through the bad tasting medicine pretty early and pretty quickly. It's this button. What this button's going to do, it's going to go through and analyze the angle of all the polygons inside of your scene, and it's going to smooth. It's going to basically create a hard edge on any surface that has an angle greater than 40 degrees. Okay? It's a good place to begin. You just click this button. Let me zoom out some. Boom. Now my little boards are back, right? Now the geometry hasn't changed, but the computer's understanding of how to smooth the lighting information in between the polygons has changed, okay? These two things, usually for me, I hit the purple button to smooth or to define hard edges around the boundaries of all my UVs, and then the next thing I do is smooth according to an angle. That usually gets me in the ballpark. However, this is our model. It's our responsibility to make sure that everything is set perfectly before we export. Like I said, this is the windmill in Back to the Future Part 3. We got to get this right before we export. So what I like to do now, and I can see some errors in here. Yeah, it botched it here. It fixed one thing and then broke another. The way to test it and to really get a good visualization as to where these boundaries of our smoothing groups are is to turn on this option right here. This is going to show you all the hard edges in your mesh. And I need to deselect my geometry and then hit the button. Okay, so these are all the edges. Okay. Now in the context of this corner, we need to go through and start removing some of these hard edges and turning them into soft edges. A hard edge is going to create a result that looks like this, where it's only going to smooth along. It's basically going to terminate the smoothing algorithm. A soft edge is going to blend. Okay, so I want to go in and start maybe changing some of this. Okay, and I'm going to focus just on this one board. And because when you're looking at everything together, this just turns into garbledygook, right? It's like you can't make heads or tails of it visually very easily. So whenever I see a problem, I isolate. Okay, there's my problem. Let's look at how we can solve this problem. All right. So really, probably what I want, if you look at the actual geometry in here, okay, is that we don't necessarily want that to be a hard edge, right? Let's just grab all of these guys. Let's just see what we get. I'm not going to do everything. But let's transition them from a hard edge to a soft edge. That's what this does. This softens the edge and allows us to smooth over. Okay? Now let's just do this. Sometimes it's easier just to soften everything and see where we need to have the hard edges go. Like maybe, let's just see what happens when I just harden those edges. So this is going to soften the edge. This is going to smooth the edge. Excuse me, I just said that backwards. This is smooth. This is hard. I apologize. Yeah. Now it's creating a real tight transition. If that's what you're after, that's cool. I think I'm going to put them back to smooth. What about the corners? Sometimes if you just do the corners, that creates a cool look. Point being is you have to experiment with this a little bit. Yeah, that looks horrible. So let's put that back. Yeah, I think in all honesty, these look good smoothed out, right? Because now the lighting is smoothing over and rounding out the edges for us, right? It's creating the illusion of a much higher quality model than is actually there. Because remember, that's just a flat surface, but it looks like it's rounding out. That's because of the smoothing groups, okay? So I usually just do a spot check, okay? Looks like a lot of mine got botched. I'm going to turn off the lights, the cameras and the lights. There we go. And I'm just going to go in and fix the ones that I want to fix. Some of them I like having them be kind of sharp, chiseled edges. But maybe on these guys in here. Yeah, that's good. Moto trick of the day. How do I convert a polygonal selection into edge selections? Good trick, especially given the context of what we're talking about. Check this out. If you hold down the Option key, now we're converting from a polygonal selection into edges. So this is the Option key. It allows us to convert from one component selection type into another. So I can select all the polygons, hold down the Option key, and bloop, now I've converted those into edges. Okay? And now I can just soften them, and we're on our way. Yeah, that looks pretty stellar. In my model here, I got basic boards. If you have organic shapes, things that have a lot of cylindrical or spherical faces, this is absolutely something you need to double check. Okay? For a cylinder, you almost need to kind of completely reboot the hard edge or the smoothing groups and redefine all your hard edges because the computer does a really bad job initially of figuring out what that looks like. So we got to go in and look at all of our smoothing groups and establish hard edges and soft edges. Think of them like a start point and a stop point. I want to smooth, I want to have the light rays and the shading engine smooth my geometry in here. Other places I don't want it to smooth, and we need to define those areas with edges. Okay? We're going to see this again and again and again going forward, but I at least want to establish the idea early on. Okay? So that's the first thing that we need to do. In the treasure chest, we're going to see this in detail with the treasure chest, because the treasure chest, my model of the treasure chest is a pretty defined, kind of cylindrical shape to it. Okay? So we'll see this in practice again. All right, let's unhide the rest of the model. And that's step one, is to establish our hard and soft edges, our smoothing groups. This is going to follow us throughout the rest of the process. Step number two, okay? Step number two is to create the correct tangent space, okay? Now, this is kind of a weird idea, okay? This idea of tangent spaces, and think of it like, think of it as like at each corner of a surface, there is a tangent, an arrow that defines where that corner is. We need to make sure that that substance understands the direction of all of our corners, okay? We do that with a tangent space. And each rendering engine has their own kind of definition of what that corner angle is going to look like. We need to make sure that the model that we export from Moto is in sync with substances understanding of these tangent spaces. Long story short, if you remember one thing, all we need to do is go over here. Okay, we're going to create a cool tangent space, but don't just click on the button because we want to add a very specific tangent space. Okay, we want to press and hold, and we're going to do the MIC tangent bias. Okay, this is the one that we want to create for models that go into both Substance Painter and Designer, the MIC tangent space. Okay, that's all we need to do. Just click on the button. If you cruise back down over here into our other maps section, Modo does a really great job of communicating the steps that we've just completed. We can see that we have all of our hard and soft edges. That's communicated to us in the hard edges section of our other maps. The tangent basis that we just added, that MIC tangent basis, has been saved. You can see that over there in tangent basis. Okay, so some good visual reinforcer that we've done the 2 prep stages in getting our model ready for export. So once we do that, we're finally ready to get our model out of Modo and into a place that we can, oh, I'm sorry, there's one more thing. There's 3 things. I knew there was 3 things, okay? And I apologize. The last thing that we have to do is some shader tree work. Now, I'm working in this project file. I have a singular mesh item, so we want to make sure that everything's in one mesh item. It should already be. But let's examine our shader tree, because I have a singular material called Wooden Cradle 3. Okay, this is the exclusive material group. All the polygons in my scene are tagged to this one material group. This is a good foundation for our mesh. Okay, we are walking away from our global shading system that the shader tree in Modo kind of supports. Okay, and we're going to local shading. Okay, so we want to have one material group, one texture set, and one UV map. Okay. So all the polygons from our mesh get assigned to a singular material group. Okay? Now, how did I do that? How did I get all the polygons for my create assigned to a singular material group? Selected all of them, hit the M key. Okay? Everything gets assigned to one material. Okay? This material is now going to follow the model everywhere we send it. Okay? So we send it over to Substance Painter. It's going to work, right? We send this exact same model over into Unity. That singular material is going to follow it, okay? So one mesh item, one material group, one UV map, and then one texture set. Everything is local to just that one model, okay? Make sense? Okay, cool. This is a stumbling block for a lot of folks, because previously, if I had like, I don't know, a hinge or something on my crate, right? I'd have like 2 or 3 different materials in Modo. Maybe like one material for the wood planks, another material, like a metal material for the hinge, another one for, I don't know, like the nail holes or something crazy like that. We're not doing that anymore, right? That's the old way of working. That's the Modo-centric way of working. In the game art pipeline, we have one material group, and then we create a texture set that goes inside of that material group, okay? On one hand, it makes it a little bit easier. Yeah?
How do you do the tangent thing again?
Yeah, super easy. So in the Game Tools section, specifically the Vertex Map collection of tools is down here at the bottom. And what we want to add is the MIC tangent basis. Okay? Now notice that there's a little dark arrow in the lower right-hand corner. So we want this one. We don't want create current. I don't even know what that is. No, that's the Modo specific tangent basis. We want the MIC tangent basis. Okay. I have no idea. Mick Jagger. I don't know. I really don't know. Probably, in all honesty, probably the computer scientist or the researcher that came up with this understanding, that did the science behind it. I would hope, right? Because if I was a researcher and I was doing this, I would name everything after me. Anyways, all right. Okay, so now that we have our smoothing groups established, our tangent basis established, a singular material group, we can finally export our model from Modo and start sending it over into Substance Painter. Okay? Now, how are we going to do this? Okay? That's the question. And I want to make sure that everyone's on the same page, because this happens every single semester, and I collectively go, guys, you're not listening. Okay? This is different from Photoshop or Illustrator or basically any other app out there. So don't go File menu, Export. No. Okay? What we're trying to export is just the geometry. We don't want the lights and the cameras and all the other Modo scene-specific stuff. We just want the geometry. So here's how we do it. It's actually so easy it's hard. Okay? You've been staring at this functionality since day one inside of Modo, but you probably have just kind of skipped it. Check it out. Here's the mesh item. I just want to export just this one mesh item, right? Nothing else. Okay? You can right-click. Export selected layers. Okay? This is going to export just this one mesh item. Okay?
And the material.
That's correct. Yeah, and the material is kind of is linked to the geometry. Okay? All right. So when you click on this button, you're going to get this little popover. And now it's going to ask us, well, what type of model file do we want to send out, right? We don't want a Modo scene file. Substance Painter doesn't support that. The Substance collection of tools, they want to, and pretty much everyone else on the face of the planet, excuse me, they want to have an FBX file. Okay? Autodesk Fbx 2018, that's our jam. Okay? That's what we're going for. This is going to pump out a file that's easily importable into basically any app on the face of the planet. The FBX file format is pretty well supported inside of our industry. It's everywhere. This is the same type of file that we're going to be popping out here in a second to go over into Unity. Okay? If you're sending something over to the Unreal Game Engine or Lumberyard, wherever you're going, 9 times out of 10 it's going to be an FBX file format. So this is going to be our workhorse for the next foreseeable future. So Autodesk Fbx 2018. Don't do 2015. 2018 has the latest and the greatest. 2018 kind of syncs up quite wonderfully for what Substance is expecting, right? This I/O conversation is interesting because we need to, in order for us to import something into Substance, we need to make sure that we're exporting it from Modo in a way that can be imported, right? So 2018 has the latest and greatest. It's pretty universal. You're going to like it. Although, I'm really kind of excited about this. There's a new file format that just came out called GITIF that I'm kind of excited about. Of all people, Facebook is kind of, they're the originators of this file format. And it's a new open source file format that's going to hopefully change our process a little bit. Because as you can see from the title here, who owns the FBX file format? The Galactic Evil Empire, right? Also known as Autodesk. Right? So sorry, I shouldn't have said that on the live stream. I'm convinced that the Emperor Palpatine of Autodesk is going to come and hurt me somehow now. But Autodesk controls this file format, right? They can do whatever they want with it, including charge people access to the file format, right? So open source technology is definitely where we want to go. Facebook has created a really great alternative that's open source.
If that ever happens, just look him straight in the eye and go, "Your overconfidence is."
So there's one more. I like that. There's one more thing that we want to do before we hit the OK button, and this is just for me. I always put on just layers to ensure that just the layer that I selected is going to be the one that's going to be exported out. Okay, so let's hit OK. Now, only you can prevent forest fire, so if you don't remember where you saved your stuff, guess what? I don't remember where you saved your stuff. Oops. All right. So I'm saving my FBX to the desktop. You're always going to get this warning, okay? There's literally nothing you can do. Just hit OK. It's just a warning saying, hey, some things aren't getting exported. That's fine, okay? That's fine. So let's go check out what's happened. Here's the FBX, okay? That's what it looks like. FBX, it's a great file format. You're going to find these everywhere, okay? And with that in mind, we're ready to start working, okay? Now that we have our model out of Modo, we can start looking at the texture process over in Substance Painter. And let's be good stewards of our future self, okay? Because we're about to generate a tremendous amount of information from Substance Painter. So we want to make sure that we're managing this correctly. So there's two things that I would really suggest that you do pretty early on, if not the first thing, to make it easier for you to manage your kind of process in Substance Painter. Okay? First and foremost, let's be good media managers. I'm going to create a folder called wooden crate _03. You're probably wondering why it's _03, because, you know, when you're modeling things, you know, you have a wine barrel, and I may actually keep that wine barrel. Then you got a crate, and then you have another crate that's different, right? And then another crate that's even more different, and then maybe a fourth one that's even more different, right? You have a lot of assets, okay? So a convention, some sort of naming convention is helpful, okay? So I now have a folder called Wooden Crate 03, and inside that folder, I'm going to add a new folder called Textures. What would you imagine is going to go in this Textures folder? Oh, I don't know your textures, right? Because we're going to generate a tremendous amount of texturing information from Substance, okay? In addition, on the inside of this Textures folders, I like to have another folder called Sources. My Sources folder are really the raw assets that I'm using to build my texture set. This model file, this FBX file, is now kind of a raw asset. It's a building block of the texture. So I want to put my model file in here. Right there. There we go. Okay. So if you look at the folder hierarchy here, and perhaps this is the best way of kind of visualizing it, I have, let's see if I can make this a little bit bigger. A little too big. Okay, there we go. So I have a folder called Wooden Crate. This is where I'm going to put like my raw LXO in here. Then I have a subfolder called Textures. This is where all of my texture information is going to go. And then at the moment, I just have a singular folder called Sources, and this is where my raw building block assets are going to go, right? I try to establish this folder system pretty early on. It's a good foundation. It allows me to work pretty quickly and keep track of all these things, because we're going to have a lot of stuff to manage here in a minute. All right, let's do it. It's go time. Substance Painter, this is it. We are not working on the latest and greatest version of Substance in this classroom. Please note, okay? We are working in, this is Algorithmic's unfortunate problem. We bought our license, and then about a month after our license, they completely redid their licensing scheme, and in that redo, they said, oh yeah, you're now going to have to update every year to get the latest and greatest. It's a problem that we're going to have to manage, okay? Point being, we're not on the same version that you're going to have access to if you were to go down and get a student license of Substance Painter today, okay? We're on the old version. We're on version 2 point something. We're on 2.6. They've completely changed their versioning system. Now it's by year, so it's 2018.1, I think, is the most recent version of Substance Painter. They're definitely not backwards compatible. Point being, yeah, they are not backwards compatible, not even a little bit. Modo is like a teeny bit backwards compatible. Like if you were to take a version 11 file, a version 11 Modo model file, and open it in version 10, you'd probably still see your model. That's not the way, unfortunately, Substance Painter is designed, so backwards compatibility is not even close to an option. So if you start a project here, and then you take it home to continue working on it, you're not going to be able to open that project in this lab, okay? Remember that, okay? That's an important point, okay? A lot of folks, they get stumbled on this, right? They go, are you kidding me? I can't open my project files that I made at home here? Yes, that is the answer to the question, okay? So what are your solutions? Either finish at home or do everything in here or in the design lab. That way you're not having to run into this problem, okay? At the conclusion of this semester, so basically over the summer, we'll be upgrading and getting in sync with the current kind of system that Algorithmic is doing. Okay. So with that said, let's have some fun, right? Working inside a Substance Painter is pretty fun. You're going to love it. It's completely changed my workflow. And getting up and running is pretty easy, but there is something that we need to look at specifically. So let's start off. File, of course, new. You're going to need a little dialog box. Okay. Now, there's a couple things in here that we need to look at pretty early on. Okay. First and foremost, we want to make sure that we're using the PBR metallic roughness preset that comes from algorithmic. This is good. We don't really want anything else. Okay, everyone has kind of centralized around the metallic roughness understanding of how lighting works. So you just need to leave that at its defaults, which is pretty cool. The next thing that we need to do is load the mesh. Okay, so this is where our media management comes in. Here's my wooden crate, textures, sources, double click, you're on your way. Now, the last thing that we need to be aware of is our normal map format. Okay, since we're working on a Mac, our graphics cards work on a different architecture than that of the PC side of things. So we want to choose, or we don't want to use the DirectX format for understanding surface directions and normals. Okay, that's the PC side of things. Okay, if you're authoring this asset at home on a PC, you leave it at DirectX. Here in our Mac labs, we're OpenGL. Okay, the Mac has a completely different architecture when it comes to understanding surfaces. So we want to make sure that what we are creating is in sync with that. Now, this is something that's only important at the authoring stage. When we export our maps out, it's not a problem. But it's important for while we're working here on these computers. Okay, so OpenGL. And then we need to figure out a resolution. Now, this luckily for us, and this is one of the powerful things about Substance, is that this is a sliding scale. We're not linked to this. Okay, we need to pick a resolution for our asset. The higher the resolution, the more quality we're going to get, but also, in turn, file sizes are going to get quite big. Okay, so we have to pick and choose. Okay, for a little crate, how big and how much quality should we put on a prop like a crate? 1024 is perfect. A 1K texture is probably just fine. If it was a really important crate, like a treasure chest that has, I don't know, some magical power that we know that everyone's going to see and is important, then maybe a texture set of higher quality is relevant. If it's like a character that's going to be right next to the render camera in your game, something that we know our audience is absolutely going to see, 4K is probably the place we want to be, right? 4K textures are very much part of our current texturing pipeline, okay? So don't be afraid of 4K. Everyone, they look at these numbers and they go, oh, that's the maximum. Or maximum is scary, right? Maximum is big. No, maximum is what we're doing now, right? Weapons that are right next to the screen, right? Guarantee it's a 4K texture, right? Because at that distance, you're going to see the discrepancy. You're going to actually see the pixels in the textures. So we need a lot of pixels to suspend disbelief. I want to leave it at 1024 just for my little crate, and then hit OK. That's all we need to do. It's going to think about it for a second. Ha-ha! Here we are, up and running. Now we can start working. Okay. Okay, so Grant's pretty close. Okay, so let's talk about viewport navigation. This may solve your problem pretty quickly. Yeah, because we're going to get a viewport, and your viewport may look a little bit different depending on who's used Substance Painter in the past. First and foremost, if it looks, if it looks like this, you're good. Okay, if it looks like this, obviously you're good. If it looks like this, hit F2. Because what are you seeing here? Your UVs. Okay, F1. F2 and F3 are going to change your viewport, okay? F1 is going to split it, interactive 3D view on the left, your UV map on the right, F2, and then of course F3 is just your UVs, okay? So hit F2. I like to start here just so I can start to see my model. Now, navigating around your viewport is really easy. For us in the Substance world, it's the Option key, and then the left mouse button and drag will allow you to orbit, kind of rotate your model a little bit. The orbit properties are very, very different from that of Modo. I'm sorry. I wish they were the same. So it takes some getting used to. If the people at Algorithmic are listening, you should buy Modo. Okay. And make them all on the same page. That'd be fantastic because they'd go really well together. So Option key, left mouse button, drag around. Middle mouse button and Option key will do your pan. Okay, and then Option right mouse button will allow you to zoom in and zoom out. So it's pretty easy to work inside of our 3D space. Okay. All right. So now that we have our model inside of Substance, and hopefully many of you guys have your model inside of Substance. I can see some of you guys playing along, which is pretty great. Here, I'll tell you what. You're welcome. I'm about to gift you something. Okay. Just so everyone has something to play with, because I know that we're in different spots. I'll just give you the project file that I'm working with. Go crazy. If you want to use my little crate model on any future game, go nuts. Just give credit. Yeah, that's all I ask for. Just a simple little tip of the hat. Right? Yeah, exactly. There you go.
I can't find my UV maps, and my things all checkerboard.
You can't find your UV maps. Okay. Are you in Substance Painter?
Yeah.
Okay. 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 So the problem that Mike's running into, and this is a keyboard setup problem. Right now, Michael is hitting F2, and he is experiencing this level of frustration. He is dimming the brightness of his machine. Okay, this is of no fault of his own. It's just a system property that we need to change. Okay, go to your global system preferences, Mike. And inside of here, specifically, we want to open the keyboard preference pane. Excuse me. Then also, last but certainly not least, we want to check on, use F1, 2, and etc. as standard function keys, because we actually need the function keys, right? For 99.98% of the working world, the function keys go unused, but for us in the 3D world, we use the function keys all the time. And that will begin to solve your problem, Mike.
I still can't find my UV maps.
They're there. No, that's it. On the right, that's your UVs. Yep.
Why is it like that, though? That's not how it was.
Okay. I don't know. How did you export this out? Export selected layers. Yep, good. All right. Okay, hold on a sec. This is probably your problem. You have 2 UV maps. Wood and texture. That's your problem. Get rid of texture. Okay. Yeah. Okay. So let me put this model file on y'all's desktop real fast. And at the very least, you can have something to play with. I know some of you guys are still working on your own little crate here. But at the very least, I'll give you something to play with. Where did I store it? Oh. Bloop.
It already has the UV map on, right?
Ready to rock and roll. Yep. Because it says checking for duplicate items on target computers. That's interesting. All right. Hopefully in a second that will finish its process.
So this is going to be underneath downloads on all the computers?
Duplicate item found. Okay. That's interesting.
That's me.
Huh?
18? That's me.
That's, yeah. Let's see what happens here. All right. In a minute, hopefully that file will show up on your desktop. Okay. Is it done? Oh, it failed on like all of them.
Wait, is it Wooden Cradle 3?
Yeah.
I see it on my desktop.
So 4 people got lucky. Right. Okay, let's try this again. I have no idea why that didn't work. Let's try this again. Copy. Oh, wait. Ah, the eagle has landed. Okay, now it should be on your desktop. Okay.
Substance Painter, is that pretty expensive?
No, it's not. You know, the crew down at Algorithmic is doing it right when it comes to pricing, and they give you a free student license. So there's no reason not to play in the sandbox. Yeah, instantaneously a free student license. It's great. Yeah.
Can we choose old models or old versions?
Oh, I don't know off the top of my head. Yeah.
You know, you were saying on Mac you have to use, was it
OpenGL, yeah.
Can you alter that if you're working between a Mac and a PC?
Oh, I believe the answer to that question is yes. I think it's in this project. Yeah, it's in this project configuration. So edit project configuration, and then you change it here to DirectX. I think you just got to change it back and forth, I think. All right. Yeah. Oh, you broke it, Adrian. What computer number are you? 17. 17 is not on my list. Here, I have a better way of doing this. Oops, I don't want to reset student view. Okay. All right. For those of you that need to download it, this may actually be the easiest way to work with it. It's right there. It's just sitting in our weekly module on Canvas. So if you didn't get the file, just download it from Canvas real fast. I have a love-hate relationship with the network in our classroom because 5 machines just aren't even seen. All right. Okay. So has everyone been able to open up the file and import it into Substance Painter? I would encourage you to play around with something, either mine or preferably the one that you made, right? Okay. So the benefit of working inside a Substance Painter is it allows us to very quickly and very easily start to go in and assign textures, okay? To either use existing textures or, as we get more experience with this, start creating our own textures. I think for this week, what we're going to do is maybe just use the preset library that comes with Substance Painter so we can start to understand how this entire crazy system works, okay? Today is not going to be a comprehensive everything you need to know about Substance Painter in one day because that is impossible, okay? Every week, basically going forward till about week 14, in all honesty, we're going to be talking about Substance Painter. So we're not going to do it all today, because you guys wouldn't remember any of it. But I do want to introduce the idea of simple masks, okay, and the role of our layers stack over here, okay. The Substance Painter interface is pretty easy to follow. Of course, we have our viewer upstairs. Downstairs is a pretty great preset library, or just library, that comes with a lot of presets, okay. We can build our own, or we can use some of the stuff that's already comes with Substance Painter. It's great. I have no problem with presets. 9 times out of 10, you're going to have to customize the preset to get the look that you're looking for, but they're a good starting point, right? There's no reason not to use them, right? If we don't need to reinvent the wheel, let's not reinvent the wheel. You don't get bonus points for making everything by yourself, okay? So this is our library down here at the bottom. And then probably most importantly, we have our layers palette, okay? And then our properties palette. Now, in this version of Substance Painter, we have these tabs, and the tabs are at the bottom, okay? So we get our properties. So those are the really important moments at the moment for our Substance Painter interface, okay? So if I go into properties, it's going to show me all the properties down here at the bottom, all the properties of whatever it is that I'm working on, okay? So let's real quickly, excuse me, I'm using the Moto keyboard shortcuts. That's never going to work. Actually, it does work. You can go back and retarget all the keyboard shortcuts to be identical to Moto, which is great, by the way. I've actually done that on my laptop. It makes it very easy. So let's talk about the different types of layers that we can build inside of Substance and how we can control them. Okay? There's basically two types of layers that we have access to inside of Substance Painter. We can add them into our layers stack over here. Okay? Now, one of the criticisms that I have of their interface, they make these icons really, really tiny. In my old eyes, that's kind of a problem for my old eyes. It's like, oh my, it's okay. So the first one that I want to talk about is a fill layer. Okay? This little paint bucket guy. The fill layer is basically going to flood the entire region of our mesh with color. Okay? Now what's cool about Substance in this interactive workflow, and you can see that I have my fill layer selected. With the properties panel enabled, we get all the properties downstairs. Okay? The cool thing about working with these substances is that we're not actually just doing color. We're actually doing a number of things all at the exact same time. We're doing color, we're doing height information, roughness. Okay, if you go back into Modo, roughness is what? Like how smooth our surfaces are. With a roughness value very, very low, we're going to see all the reflections in our environment. With a roughness value very high, it's all going to get blurred out, right? Metallic, this isn't something that we often use in our workflow over in Modo, but it's basically specularity, how reflective it is, and this is the amount of reflectivity, and then how blurred that reflection is. And then the normal information, this is something that's specific to the game art pipeline. This is kind of like bump maps, if you will. Defines surface relief along our objects. So we're actually doing a number of things at the exact same time. It's not just color. Let me show you exactly what I'm talking about here. Now I'm going to go into the base color channel of my fill layer, and let's just give it a cool shape. Let's make it like, I don't know. I'm making mine blue. Why not? And you can see immediately that my entire crate goes blue. So it's live, interactive, right in front of us, which is kind of fun. Okay. Now, as I play around, I'm going to skip height because that's something that's kind of difficult to see at the moment. Watch what happens when I start messing around with my roughness. Okay? With my roughness slider all the way down, my surface now turns into like a mirror. I can see the reflections of the environment that my cube is currently living on. So roughness, just like over in Modo, determines how blurry, it determines the quality of our specular highlight, or the specularity of our surfaces. Okay? Yeah, cool, right? Yeah, and there is an environment that this object is, of our scene. We're currently, our viewer currently has that environment off, okay? But it is there, right? Yeah, metallic kind of starts to adjust the specularity a little bit. Okay, you play around with that. And now normal doesn't have a slider because it requires some additional information. Again, using the Modo keyboard shortcuts here, which is, the F key is going to fit your object in the scene. Good thing to commit to memory. Yeah, it's cool, right? And I'm upside down, actually. Get a compass too. Okay. So that's really kind of what we're adjusting here on all of our layers. We're determining color, height information, roughness information, metallic and normal information. Okay. Now I'm going to leave my roughness. See, I don't want it like perfectly mirror-like, so I'm going to just blur it out a little bit. Okay. Yeah, that's a good place to begin. Now, fill layers are always going to flood the entire surface with this color information, okay? However, we can change this if you'd like, okay? And this kind of speaks to the power of the layer stack over inside of Substance, okay? What if I only want to have a certain number of boards be blue, okay? Maybe I only want to have these crossbar guys in here be blue and everything else be a different color. This is where our masking engine comes into play. And if you've ever done anything in Photoshop, this is going to feel very, very natural for you because it's identical. And I mean identical to the way that Photoshop handles all of its masking. And let me show you how it works. Okay? So, over here inside of our layers stack, I'm going to right-click on my fill layer. And I'm going to add a black mask. we can also add a white mask. Now, if you're used to working inside of Photoshop, this idea of having a grayscale image determine the transparency of the associated layer is probably something that you've seen before, right? We're doing that exact same thing. For you newbies out there that haven't worked with masks, we're going to turn the visibility of all of our pixels off with black pixels, okay? Think of it like a switch. Wherever we have black in our mask, it's off. Wherever we have white, those pixels are on. The grayscale values in between on and off are going to give us a percentage of opacity. So I want to add a black mask. Okay? You can actually get a little thumbnail preview of the mask there. And now that blue layer has been turned off. Okay? The visibility of all the pixels on that layer have been turned off. We haven't deleted it. It's still a player in our layer stack. We've simply just changed the transparency values of all of the pixels. Well, let's go in and start determining some white pixels in here. Okay? Now, there are a number of tools that we can use to do this. I want to show you one, probably one of my favorites. Okay? Oh, my toolbar is a little bit different than how I have it at home. It's this guy right here. It's the number 4 key on your top row of numbers. Okay? This is the Polygon fill tool. It's a great way for us to very quickly make some assignments, okay? So I got my Polygon fill tool active, and with it you can see all the wireframes of your geometry. And now, please note that I have my mask selected. How do I know that my mask is the one selected object inside of my layer stack? Yeah, it's got the little blue outline around it, right? Now, the Properties tab of our Polygon fill tools is going to determine what we're going to mask, okay? So we can mask individual vertexes, okay, vertices. These are individual surfaces, faces. These are meshes, entire mesh chunks. Or, and I think probably this is where it gets to be really cool and powerful, UV islands. Okay, and that's the one that I'm going to use. And I'm, of course, going to paint with white right up here. This little slider, I wish it was a different color. I wish it was like blue or something so we could really see it. But I'm putting my color picker at white. Okay? And now, check it out. Since I'm masking or I'm painting in the UV island mode, I can just click on my UV islands, and now the blue is only going on the UV islands that I click on. Huh?
That's awesome.
Yeah, cool, right? It allows us to very quickly go in and kind of make some meaningful connections. And within just a couple seconds here, I can grab all of these parts and pieces. Okay? If I hit the 1 key, it takes me back to the brush, which is a great way to kind of conclude that operation. There we go. Ah, it's pretty neat. If you look over here in our layer stack, you can kind of see the hard work that that Substance Painter is doing in the back end.
Is there any way you can change the direction of the texture in Substance Painter?
Yeah, absolutely. And we're going to come back to that in a minute, but the answer is yes, easily. Yeah. All right. So that's pretty cool. I'm digging that, right? That's a great way to go in and add some basic color. Now, what if we want to go in and maybe to answer Michael's question, add maybe a texture into the mix? Because not everything's just going to be these simple solid colors. What if we wanted to take in an image of like some wood grain and start putting that together pretty easily inside of our scene, right? Well, let's begin with our library. Okay, our library is an excellent place to start building our final result. As I mentioned earlier, you're going to start here. You're never going to end with the results that the library gives you because you're always going to customize it, in my experience, to specifically what you're trying to build. But they're good starting points, right? So I'm going to go into the materials section. Let's see. I'm not even sure if I have a wood material on here. Do the large icons. Let's see. There's wood American cherry. Let's do that one. Why not? Okay. Now this is a material. This is like a fill layer that has a lot of different assets. Say again? Don't double click on it yet. Yeah, double click isn't going to give you what you after. Okay. Actually, yeah, double click isn't going to do anything. But if we drag and drop it, maybe in our layer stack, you can see what's going on. Now I chose to put my my preset right below my blue fill layer. Okay. If I put it above it by dragging and dropping, it covers it up. Okay. Now this isn't masked out. It's like Photoshop, right? We're flooding the entire image with this preset. So the order of operations here is important at the moment. I'm going to take my blue, just left click and drag it on top, and we're on our way. All right, and there it is. Now it's beginning to look a little bit like what we're after, but is it really kind of giving us the illusion that we're after? No. Okay, it's in the right direction, but what do we need to change? What do we need to change? And maybe the size, it looks a little too big on what it's being placed on. And if you look carefully at the orientation of the grain, yeah, gotta rotate it 90 degrees. It's going the wrong way, okay? So if we select here, our properties panel is going to give us all, this part up at the top is going to give us everything that we're after, okay? We'll look at the properties first, and then we'll look to maybe how we can customize it, okay? Because these substances are pretty neat. So the first thing that we want to do is maybe do the UV rotation, okay? Now at the moment, my wood grain is kind of going the wrong direction on pretty much everything. Yeah, it's wrong all across the entire mesh. So here's what I'm going to do. Under the UV rotation, let's just rotate it. If you click on the little pencil, 90 degrees. Now, at F. Yeah, now we're started. Okay, now we're getting somewhere. Now at the very least, the grain pattern is going the way we want it to go. Hitting the tab key, by the way, it goes full screen. Yeah, now everything is kind of, the grain is really going the direction we want to go in. However, maybe it's the wrong size. That's where UV scale comes in. Okay, UV scale is going to allow us to change, and let's link both these values together. Okay, let's put it to 5. Yeah, now we can start playing around with the scale of all this, and even with it, this particular substance is kind of bandy. The colors are really, kind of bandy, right? So it's difficult to see it changing, but the UV scale, yeah, I can kind of see it. If I do it slowly, you can see the texture detail is getting smaller and smaller and smaller as I increase the UV scale. Let's take it down. Yeah. So you got to find the appropriate sense of scale for the mesh itself. That's pretty cool. Let's put this back. I liked it at 4. And we're on our way. It's starting to look pretty cool. One of the great things about a lot of the presets that come with Substance that we can customize them. Maybe we don't want the color. We can change the color of it real quick, right? And also randomize it, which I think is really kind of neat. You just keep on hitting random until you find a result that you're after. That's pretty neat. No, seriously. It's like, I don't like that, randomize it. I don't like that, randomize it. And go and change the color. Maybe I want my wood to be green. On our way. Okay. It looks like in this particular material, they're allowing us to mess around with the roughness values, which is helpful. You can also go in and start to increase, let's see. At this resolution, increasing and decreasing the fibers visually isn't doing a whole lot. If this texture was, if we're making like a 2K texture, we'd probably see it. But yeah, there's some parameters in here that we can change, which is pretty neat. All right, that's starting to look pretty good. Okay. Now the cool thing about these fill layers is that we can mask them. We can mask until we go crazy, right? Maybe I only want to have a couple pieces be this this wood texture. Add a black mask. Just make sure the mask is selected, and then go grab your Polygon fill tool, this guy, 4 key on your number pad. And I like the UV. We'll talk about the others as we get a little bit more comfort in, but now we can just say only these guys in here are going to get this information. And we're on our way. Okay? Here, let's have some fun with this for a second. We'll make something really wacky and weird. and then we'll call it a day. Well, we'll call it a day in Substance. We got to do one more thing, and let's get our stuff out of Substance. Like I said, today's goal is just to kind of get us generally up and running. We're going to be talking every week about Painter, because this is about not even 1% of the total content of what we're going to do in here. I'm using the Moto keyboard shortcuts again.
I feel you.
Okay. All right, that's good. All right. So let's do one more. Now, there's another way that we can work, and I actually like this way. I find myself doing this quite often. In addition to adding a fill layer, we can also add a folder. Okay? And I want to put this folder way up here at the top, and let's just call this metal. Okay? Now, whatever goes inside that folder, obviously, is going to be controlled by the visibility icon, and we can also mask it. Okay? So let's do, I don't know, let's figure out. Let's do rust in the folder. Everything goes rusty. What I use folders for are really complex systems, right? I can also kind of start to audition things. Yeah, maybe I don't like that. That's cool. I can turn it off. It'll draw here. It'll update here in a second. One other thing that's kind of fun is that we can mask a folder, right? That's neat. I like that. Because now I can go in and say, okay, just that. That. I get all of them. Nope, one more. Are going to receive the contents of my folder mask, right? And now I can just go in and, you know, turn on the rust. It's not updating for whatever reason. Let's delete it, put it back in the folder. Point being, whatever's in the folder is going to receive that mask, just like over in Photoshop. There we go. Now it's working. You're going to audition things, see how they're working without having to remask or repaint everything. Just put them in the folder, let the folder do all the hard work, and then you can start making some intelligent decisions on how you want your object to look. Okay? All right. So I'm going to get rid of my rust for a second, and we'll just leave it as is, because there's one final thing that we need to do. We're going to pretend that we're done. Okay? And now we need to get our stuff out of Substance and back into Moto. Okay? This is not a trick, but there definitely is a setup that we have to go through here. And I would encourage you to do this together now with me so that in this lab it's done. But if you go into the design lab, you're going to have to make this preset yourself. And if you go home, you're going to need to make a preset. Okay? This preset tells the computer how to export out all of this stuff in a way that Moto can read it. Okay? I've given you a really great reference sheet, and I didn't come up with this. This came directly from the makers of the application. There it is. This is the page. This is the picture that kind of shows you what the preset needs to look like as you're building it. We're going to go over this here in a second. See, refer back to this, okay? In addition, there's a video that Algorithmic put together. Sorry. Here it is. This video, thank you, YouTube, for breaking this. Here we go. Okay. So apparently that was fun, wasn't it? You got to click on that to get it to open up the link. Anyways, yum, yum. So this video is basically a regurgitation of everything that I'm about to say. Okay. So refer back to these two documents if you get lost or you get confused. It's not hard, but you need to make it, right, in order for this to work. Because Moto has a very specific, and I mean a very specific expectation for how it's going to receive all of this texture information so that everything matches, right? Because what you want to be able to have is this in here look identical to how it looks over in Moto, right? We want both things to look the same. If we don't have this preset established and configured correctly, they're going to look very different from one another, okay? So there's two things that we need to do, okay? Let's pretend I'm done. File, of course, you're going to save your project file. I'm going to save mine back in my textures folder. I want to be a good steward. This is wooden, create, 03 texture. This is version 1. And what this is going to create for us, as an SPP file, a Substance Painter project file. That's what it looks like, okay? This one file here has all your Substance Painter work in it. It's your master file, kind of like your Photoshop document, so don't lose it. FYI, in the future, these are going to get, these are going to get very large, like a couple gigabytes in size, okay? I have a Substance Painter project file that I think is like 2-point-something gigs. It's huge, right? I'm also doing like 8K textures, so, you know, it is what it is. But they can get very big, okay? All right. So once you save your project file, we now need to export our textures, okay? We're not exporting the geometry. The geometry is already chilling back in Modo. We're just trying to export the textures themselves, okay? You're going to get this little pop over, okay? Let's give it a good location. So we need to save it somewhere. I'm going to save it back into my textures folder. So what's going to reside in the root of my textures folder is the Substance Painter project file and then all of my master textures, okay? That's good, okay? Now the configuration, this right here, is what we need to establish. These are all the different presets, okay, that the Substance Painter comes with. If you look in here, yeah, guess what's not on the list? Modo, okay? Because most of these are for game engines, right? They have like the Unity, you know, when we come to Unity, we'll be using the Unity preset, okay? But we want to make one that's specifically tied to the Modo understanding of how all these textures are going to work. So here's what we're going to do. It's really easy, but you need to do it on every machine that you come with. Okay, let's find out. Oh, yeah, right, because it requires administrator passwords. I remember running into this once, and I just forgot about that. Okay. Change in plans. Complete change in plans, because I got to figure this out. I forgot that it's a little punk. That's the problem with working in a computer lab in which you don't have complete administrator control over. Yeah.
You could add the correct channels in the channels and then export as channels.
Yes, you could do that. It's not a great way of working, though.
No, it's better to have the
Yeah. Okay. Here's what we're gonna do: complete change of plans for this week. Okay, and I'm gonna see if I can work with the computer services to install the preset in both here and in the design lab, so you guys don't have to worry about this going forward. However, I would still recommend that you watch the video that I posted on Canvas on how to make the preset for your home machines, because you'll still have to do this, right? Because what we need to do is we basically need to create a whole series of outputs, okay, and assign each one of these outputs to a very specific part of the, kind of like the rendering engine, if you will, the shader network instead of Substance, okay? It's really easy, but we just got to do it. So here's what we'll do. Complete change in plans. For this week, don't worry about making a render. Just submit your Substance Painter project file, okay? That way we can open it up and take a look at it. Sound good? Yeah? Everyone feeling it? Okay, so don't worry about a render. I'll change the expectations on the assignment sheet so everyone's up and running. Yeah, what's most important that we start working inside of Substance, and then we'll get the export stuff kind of handled once I figure out this. Luckily, our computer services technician is going to be here on Friday morning, so I'll jump in and chat with him on Friday morning. He's going to fix all of our Cintiqs in here. We're actually working on the wrong drivers for our Cintiqs, so that's going to get solved on Friday. Yeah, so let me manage this problem, and we'll keep going forward in the future. Next week, hopefully this won't be a problem, or it will still be a problem, and we'll figure out something there, okay? Okay, so when you're done, just submit your Substance Painter project file, so this thing, to the Dropbox on Canvas. Okay, so don't worry about sending it back over to Modo, mapping it back on the model. We'll handle that next week when we have that capacity. Okay.
Just for the barrel, or do you want the rest of the scene as well?
Just the barrel. Yeah, just the barrel. For our first time out, let's keep it easy for the barrel. Yep. All right. So if we return back to Canvas just for one brief moment. Okay. All right, so for your textures, okay, make sure that you go through the process that we outlined before, okay? Got to make sure you have your smoothing groups and your tangent basis established, okay? Singular material as well before you export. Those are hard and fast rules. If you don't follow those 3 steps, it is not going to work, okay? Oh, one of the things that Michael ran into earlier is he had 2 UV maps. Substance didn't know which one to load. It kind of picked one, and it picked the wrong one, unfortunately. So you can only have 1 UV map. We've got to be disciplined in our approach to this in order for all these applications to sync up correctly together. I'm going to erase all of this stuff, and I'm going to change down here just the SPP file, the Substance Painter project file.
That goes for the same for mesh, right? You only have to have 1 mesh to.
You got it. Yeah. If we cruise back over into Modo, right? Yeah. So if you look carefully, I have 1 mesh item, 1 UV map, okay, and 1 material group, okay. Yeah, it all kind of syncs together. Questions on our workflow? Everyone starting to feel it? Yeah.
Is there any way to check if your normal maps are like okay? Because I've definitely experienced where you export images from Painter and you import them to Modo,
Mm-hmm.
and like the crevices of everything has like a white glitter.
I know why. It's actually not the normal maps. It's Modo.
It's Modo.
It's the Fresnel channel. It's the one channel inside of our materials that doesn't have a map controlling it. So the Fresnel effect is going to basically whatever in its default 100%. So it's becoming super shiny just in the angle in the crevices of things. So turn that down to like off. I usually put it like 2 or 3% because everything has a little bit of Fresnel, just not maximum full blown. Yeah. All right. Questions. Good luck. We'll see you guys next week. So you lied to me.